When you visit whitehouse.gov, you are greeted with a lot of hype about our booming economy. It says, "Welcome to the golden ages." That's what it reads. But the Oval Office might be the only place where a golden age, a literal one, actually exists. No, really, every available surface appears to be gilded in gold. But the reality is a lot of Americans are not feeling so golden, not so prosperous here. As Paul Waldman writes, it's not a recession, at least for now, but Trump has delivered the meh economy. Paul Waldman joins us now, and staff writer for The Atlantic, Matt Visor, as well. Paul, right out of the gate here, in your piece, you highlight the latest figures, and they paint the real picture of what our economy is looking like. I believe it's 1.5% GDP in the second quarter, wage growth just barely keeping up with inflation, and consumer confidence falling to some all-time lows. While you say that's not a catastrophe or a recession yet, it's certainly not a golden age. Is it fair to attribute all of this to President Trump's policies, or are there other economic forces at play?
Well, there are always lots of economic forces. And I think the fact that it's not worse is a tribute to the resilience of the American economy. You know, Trump hasn't really done very much that has had a positive impact. You know, his tariffs have been basically a giant tax on the public and haven't created the kind of manufacturing boom that he said it was going to. He's driven up gas prices. The tax cuts really didn't help anybody but the wealthy. So, there really isn't anything you can point to in Trump's policies that have actually made some kind of a positive difference. And a lot of people are struggling really significantly. And for a lot of people, it's just kind of okay, and they're keeping their heads above water. But, the Trump sets the tone for the whole administration, which has to say that everything is fantastic. If you look at the comments that his economic advisors make, people like Treasury Secretary Bessent and others in his administration, Howard Lutnick at the Commerce Department, they're always saying that, like, the great times are right around the corner. Like, maybe it was 1.5% GDP growth this quarter, but next quarter it's going to be 5%. It's going to be 6%. We're just headed for this kind of explosion. And Trump himself always says that, you've never had it so good. And I think that really comes from his whole career, his whole life that was spent as kind of his own personal hype man, where, he had to convince people that everything that he did was the greatest thing that had ever been done. His buildings were the greatest buildings anyone had ever seen. If you signed up for Trump University, you were going to be rich beyond your wildest dreams. And that worked for him pretty well as a kind of, sometimes small-time grifter. But people who are voters want to see something from their president that indicates that he actually understands what their lives are like.
I want to buttress what you're saying with some real data here. 65% of respondents said that Trump policies have made the economy worse, while only 22% said that they've made the economy better. And when it comes to the overall economy, 71% describe it as not so good or poor. You were referencing how this administration has handled the messaging on all of this. Is that going to resonate? It seems as though President Trump is doing this thing where he's trying to manifest the economy or manifest how people feel versus allow people to feel what they're actually feeling.
Yeah, if you remember, Joe Biden and his administration got a lot of criticism when inflation was bad in 2022, because their line was always, we know people are struggling. It's hard, but we're doing a bunch of stuff that's going to make it better. You just have to stick with us. Things really are improving. The job situation is good. And they would find, the things that were good about the economy and say that that's what people should focus on. And they got just brutally criticized for that, per people saying, they are not connected with people. They are trying to get people to deny the situations of their own lives and what they see. And but there was always kind of with a note of apology. But nothing the Trump administration does is ever with a note of apology. They always say, like, things are actually fantastic. And I do think that really strikes a lot of people as being almost insulting. And I think that's why you see that numbers. Not only are people unhappy about gas prices and about high prices generally, and maybe about the job situation, whatever it is for them in their own lives, they're also being told by their political leadership that they don't actually understand that things are actually fantastic. And that is kind of insulting. And, he got elected because people want him to bring down prices. I think there's this real misconception within the Trump administration and a lot of other people too, that it was some kind of buy-in to the whole MAGA thing as a big ideological project. And the truth was that a lot of people, especially people who weren't like super tuned into politics and, watching MS Now every day, for those people, it was just like, yeah, the economy hasn't been great and he's a business guy. Maybe he'll make things better. And so, you can't tell those people that things are great when they don't see that in their own lives.
And certainly there is that lack of contrition. Matt, I want to bring you into the fold here. The president's proclivity for gold is well documented, well known at this point. Reporters who have been in the Oval say it's quite a sight to behold. But now in his second term, he's essentially flaunting his love of this precious metal. Many Americans, though, are struggling. They're struggling to meet ends meet. And you write, quote, "It may not quite be a let them eat cake moment, but it is one where he seems to be saying, let them see that I just spent $5 million in taxpayer funds on golden statues." Walk me through this dichotomy and how it could play out in the midterms.
Yeah, I mean, President Trump, throughout much of his life and his business career, has seen gold and marble as essential ingredients for his developments. And we've seen him redecorate the Oval Office in gold throughout, where it kind of looks like a Cracker Barrel mixed with a Middle Eastern bazaar. So he's done a lot of things with gold, but recently there's two new statues that have been unveiled in Washington. The cost is $5 million in taxpayer dollars, as is shown on the screen. And those really are sort of him flaunting this publicly. It's one of the projects that he's been proud of and wanted to complete in time for July 4th. And it comes at a time with the economy struggling, with people facing pocketbook issues ahead of the midterms. And so I think he is proud of these statues, but I think if you talk to any Republican consultant, they don't want to be talking about gilded statues in Washington, D.C. right now. They want to be talking about issues important to midterm voters. And so I do think it could play into the midterms and create a narrative around Trump being out of touch, given that he often talks about the ballroom, all of these things that he's doing in D.C. to try to change it, which doesn't resonate in the heartland and in areas of the country where the power is going to be decided for Congress.
He just as recently as a couple of minutes ago was touting the renaissance of D.C. Paul Waldman and Matt Viser, thank you both so much.